the number one tip I will give for consistent production is you need to actually Hey, welcome to the Insurance Buzz. We are your hosts, Michael and Courtney Weaver, and today we're going to talk about how to ensure consistent production day in and day out, week in and week out, month in and month out in your agency, in your career, every single, again, day, week, month, you name it. It's all about consistency, baby.
So this came up because you had a coaching call.
Yeah.
And the question was, how do I have more consistent production?
Yep.
And this is not a coaching call. This is always the conversation in every single coaching call.
Yep.
How do I have consistent, predictable revenue? That was the question. I get it. So we're gonna tackle that one. We're gonna talk about that today.
Yeah, we're gonna dive in. So the biggest thing with consistent production, I'm always gonna go back to your expectations, your standards, what you're holding the team accountable to. It needs to be clear, concise, and achievable. And I'm talking about, I like to break it down on win the day, and we can get into some of the details. So when it talks about consistent production, I like to start with a big goal. So let's just say a 3-month goal. I'm going to drop a book here that if you've never read it, called The 12-Week Year. I probably have referenced it on the Buzz before, but it's a book that kind of changed my career and how we run businesses, to where I used to focus on 12-month goals and tried to break them down to the month and then to the day. And that's fine, but 12-month goals are so long that a lot of times you won't focus on them till like month 9, and then it's too late to catch up. So I would encourage you, when thinking about consistent production, we have to have a goal in mind for the production to equate to. So let's focus on the next 12 weeks, the next 3 months, and then I want you to work backwards. So ultimately, over 3 months, what needs to happen on a monthly basis, what needs to happen on a weekly basis, and then what needs to happen on a daily basis. Following me so far? Mm-hmm. And what I mean by what needs to happen, the number one tip I will give for consistent production is you need to actually communicate with your team how to win. Mm-hmm. Like how do you even win at insurance sales? So this is more of this is not, you need to have, sure, you can say 3 conversations a day, but that's going to be more of the daily expectations. When I say, how do you win in insurance sales, I mean that your team, this is the training and learning piece. So for you to be successful at insurance sales, you have to develop into a sales professional, into an insurance professional. It just doesn't happen. And so making sure that your team understands this is what a complete auto home conversation sounds like, or auto renters, or auto home life, or hey, like in every conversation, I expect you to have a umbrella, auto, and either home or renters conversation every time. Like that, then we have to learn how to have that conversation. So how do you even win? Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. I'm going to reference a personal training example here, because what I'm hearing is somebody comes in and they say, I want 6-pack abs. Mm-hmm. And you say, okay, well, one of our first things that we have to be able to do is test your core strength. So we're going to do a plank. So that's where we're going to start. And then we have to coach to, this is the position of the plank. This is where you put your elbows, your forearms, your feet, all of that. We have to start with that. Yep. And then you're going to have to do that plank, which would move into the next. So that's the how to win. Yep. And then it would move into, this is actually how often you need to do it. Yep. And this is what I'm going to hold you to. And then we'll move on from there. Yeah.
Great job. Okay. Yeah. So it's understanding the rules of the game. Yeah. So how do you win? And there's a lot to be said about the how to win piece. So so many times we tend to lean to product knowledge because our team's like, well, I need to know more about a home product, or I need to know more about a life product, or what they're really saying is, I don't have the confidence to have a conversation about this. And I think that if I knew more about this product, it would increase my confidence. While that may or may not be true, that still doesn't help the sales conversation piece of things, in my experience of working with thousands. So sure, product knowledge is great, but actually understanding how to have conversations with customers in a process-like form, to where it's the same conversation every time with every person, just personalized to the person that you're talking about. So what I mean by this is understanding the elevator pitch, understanding how to build rapport and commonalities with the customer, how to have a discovery conversation. Yes, I'm even talking about the P&C conversations, my friends, like what's important to them in their auto policy, what's important to them in their homeowners, and then presenting that in an educational, empowering way, and asking for the sell a minimum of 3 times. That's my definition of a conversation with a customer that counts as a quote. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's the how to win part. So now you go back to the expectations. So what are the expectations of me to ensure consistent production on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? So in this example, I believe that the secret to success, consistent production, consistent revenue, predictable. Sure, we can break this down to a mathematical equation, but what really matters is the conversations. And when I say conversations, I mean quotes. And a quote is not, hey, I'm going to email you this quote. Hey, here's a text message of $225 a month. What do you think about that? That is not a quote. Now, this is my explanation of if you want consistent production, this is going to help you out. A quote is a conversation that starts with talking to somebody, building rapport, having a discovery conversation, presenting a proposal or plan, and asking for the sell 3 times. That is one quote. If somebody's ineligible, that's not a quote. If I don't present a price, that is not a quote. If I do not ask for the sell, that is not a quote. If I don't build rapport, that's not a quote. So really defining what the expectation, so not only how to win and how to be a really good salesperson, but how many of these do I need to have on a daily basis? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And we're just talking one product line right now.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I'm a firm believer in the number 3. Everything about the number 3 is magical. So when my team, if you want consistent production, so you're held accountable to 3 P&C quotes a day, you're held accountable to 3 life insurance quotes / conversations a day, and you're held accountable to 3 Google review conversations and send outs a day. Those are the 3 things that you're held accountable to on a daily basis every single day. So how you win your day is by having 3 full-blown P&C conversations a day, 3 full-blown life insurance conversations a day. And yes, those 2 can be intermingled, right? If you're going to bring up life insurance, maybe on the new business P&C, that can count as 2. And then 3 Google reviews in this example.
I think that is solid. If you stop the podcast right now and listen to nothing else, take that. The 3 P&C. No. There's more. But 3 P&C, 3 life, and 3 Google reviews.
Yeah.
Consistent production comes from there.
And this is where the coaching comes in.
Okay, can I riff on mine? Because I think we're going to cross over here a little bit.
Well, yeah, you've just been. I've been doing a lot of talking. You've been doing a lot of listening. So now it's time for me to do a lot of listening, and you need to do a lot of talking.
It's your turn to listen. It's my turn to talk. So when that question comes up for me, it's very similar to like cooking, creating anything. If you want a consistent output, you have to consistently put the same thing in the same way every single time. So a lot of times we jump to the output, we jump to the production, and we go, okay, this has to be consistent. For that to be consistent, everything leading up to that also has to be consistent. So when you look at the sales cycle, we start from lead, then we go into training. The salesperson needs to have the conversation. Then we go into the actual conversation itself, and then it's everything that comes in the close and follow up. So those are like the major points. The entry point of the prospect coming in, the training of the salesperson, the conversation, what's actually being said, and then the close / the follow-up. Those are the 4 main points that you are going to look at. So you're focused on the conversation because if nothing else, all of these could hit the fan as long as training and conversation, the people that are saying the thing to the person that's going to buy the product, as long as that is consistent and in accordance with your standards and you are holding it accountable, you will have consistent production. You can completely forget everything else. You could call your entire book of business right now and have the exact same consistent conversation, and you will very quickly see what your closing ratio is, where you are excelling, where you need to work in your training. Like you're going to get a very clear picture because you're not changing variables.
Yep.
So the thing that I see agency owners do too soon is they try to optimize before they've standardized. They try to jump to making something better until they have it consistent. So look at every single one of those things. And I know this is beefy because essentially what I'm saying is I want you to analyze your entire book of business start to finish in your customer journey. You don't have to do that. You absolutely don't have to do it. If you focus on training and conversation. So within the conversation, your point was you need to know how to win the game.
Yeah. So
you need to know what are we actually trying to achieve?
Correct.
And as a leader, this is huge. Clear communication is so important. What are they focused on? Because think about your day today, my day today, your day today. We are very easily distracted, and we are in a society that wants us distracted. That's how we're all built. Social media, the news, we process millions of information every second. Like it's a lot coming at us. So your job as the leader is to always make sure they are focused on the things that they need to be focused on, narrowing that down. That's why I said, if you listen to nothing else, PNC Life and Google reviews, money in the bank. That is what you should constantly be focused on. Now, where I see agents start to try to optimize, we need to have standard conversations across the board for all of your salespeople. Meaning, if I were to ask them, what does your sales conversation sound like? For the most part, everyone's going to have the same framework. They're just going to have infused their personality.
They should.
Yes.
This is not the case.
Okay. Yes.
They should, but this is not the case.
Okay, so
this is why we're doing this, because this is what leads to inconsistent production, because salespeople are left to just do whatever they want. Just do whatever you want. So some people are talking to one customer one way. Some in the same office aren't talking to anybody. They're just emailing out the quote or texting out the quote. This is why there is inconsistent production, because there's inconsistent training and processes within an agency.
Okay, so, and I understand this because it's what you want to do, your natural reaction is to try to accommodate the customer. You want to speak to them how they want to be spoken to, but I want to remind you that you are the professional and they have no effing clue about insurance. Absolutely none. So you can infuse your personality, but if somebody, okay, I'm just gonna break this down real quick. If somebody were to come to me and to say, I'm just going to use personal training again because I've already used that. I have a degree in that. I have a specialty in that. I know this. If somebody were to come to me and say, I would like to do a squat, but I'm going to do a squat a different way, and I'm going to see if it works. Don't try to get fancy with something that you know already works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to have a consistent conversation throughout your office. If not, you have nothing to measure. It's like a petri dish. This is a science experiment. If you change every single variable every single time, you'll never be able to track anything. You won't know if it's the elevator pitch that's broken, if it's the lead source that's broken, if they don't know how to ask for the sale, if they actually don't know what they're talking about in the liability conversation, if they need help with storytelling. You won't know that because if you don't put them, this is the rules, okay? If you don't put somebody in the system that works, and Michael just gave you the system that works. If you don't put them in a consistent system that works, it's hard to have a consistent output. It would be like me trying to change a recipe every single time and trying to get the same result. Mm-hmm. It won't work like that.
No, it doesn't work like that. And that's why, if you were part of the quote 3 process, but my book quote 3, I bought into the whole do more. And that's what we're taught in the insurance. To most people, when you answer, if they were to say this is how you get consistent production, what are they going to say?
Make more dials.
Make more calls. Make more calls. It's all a mathematical equation. If you just make 150 to 300 calls a day, and while that is there's some truth to being a mathematical equation. What the mathematical equation, when somebody tells you that, doesn't factor in is someone's emotions, the burnout, the turnover, the stress, not having any meaning in what you do because you feel like a sleazy product pusher.
Yeah.
And so and I've experienced this firsthand. That's why I can talk about it this way, and why I don't like the old way of just make more calls, just do more dials, just talk to more people.
Push through.
Yeah, that's not the trick to consistent production. The trick to consistent production is getting your team trained up, developed, understanding how to win the game, what's expected of them on a daily basis that's actually clear, concise, and achievable, and then holding them accountable to that, both sides of the accountability equation of this is what happens when you do well, this is what happens when you fall short.
Yep.
That is the recipe for clear, consistent production.
Yeah.
A clear, concise plan that everybody knows about that is achievable. Like, you can't set people up for failure. Like, you just can't. Sending out 10 text message quotes a day, sure, that's going to get you some production because you're going to save some people money, and then they're gone out the back door in 6 or 12 months. In today's market, with the market volatility that we're having, you have to be able to have conversations and build relationships with your customers that equate to predictable revenue. And predictable revenue is exactly what we're talking about here, because you're exactly right. You have to understand how to win, what type of person what conversations am I having? Great. Then how many of these conversations am I having on a daily basis? And then the accountability aspect.
Yeah, how do I optimize that?
That's right.
How do I take these people that I have that are talking to my customers, including myself, and how do I make them and myself the best? How do I improve?
The thing that you said earlier that I jumped on, because you're right. Everyone should be having the same consistent conversation with every customer every time with their own verbiage. That's not happening, though. That's not happening. In a large majority of insurance agencies, if you called in and talked to one person, if you got the same quote from another person in that office, it's going to sound like a totally different conversation.
I would say that would be the first place I would start them, because you're going to kick it out. Again, I'm going to look at this from a different perspective. You're going to kick that out. The customer is going to go through that process. Okay, we're going to run them through, they're going to become a lead, they're going to go through the salesperson, they're going to have the conversation, they're going to kick out the end where then they go through the follow-up process. But then it comes over to my side, which is a lot of what I'm doing, which is service. And now I don't know if there's not a consistent sales process, sure shit means there's not a consistent service process, because how can you consistently have top-notch service if everyone is getting a different experience on the front end?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have to standardize before you optimize, meaning everything has to have a framework. I'm not saying that we all have to be robots, but I am saying as human beings, we really have to pay attention to, have we mastered our craft, and are we giving everyone a consistent experience? This is the McDonald's analogy. This is Chick-fil-A. This is, if you were to walk into anything that makes anything, there is an assembly line that they follow a process. First, we have to, because if not, we can't track anything. Yeah, I know, you and
I am holding back right now because I hate that bullshit that when somebody's like, well, I'm going to sound like a robot. I'm going to have a bunch of No, you're not. You're not going to sound like a robot, and you're not going to have a bunch of robots in your office. What you're going to have is consistent production. What you're going to have is consistent data. What you're going to have is a way to actually hold people accountable so that they either have success or you find somebody new for the position. That's what you're going to have as a business owner, and quite frankly, as a sales professional. The only reason why you aren't doing, or why you don't want to do something like what we're saying right now, is because you're selling out of your own pocket, and you're selling the way that you want to be sold to, which is the number one way to be a failure in our business. Period. I hate when people say, well, they should be able to have their... No, they shouldn't. Because you cannot guarantee that the customer is getting educated and informed the way that you want them to get informed. And it's going to fall back on you, the agency owner, when something happens. Who's going to be the one that gets sued? Whose E&O is going to pay out? Mm. Who's going to be the one that possibly goes to jail because of malpractice? That is why everyone in your office has to start with, how do we win? What conversations are we having with customers? Yeah. How many of these do I need to be having a day? And then when I'm winning, what does that look like? And when I'm losing, what does that look like? I don't mean to get all fired up right now, but that's like the day old. Like I've been told that the last 10 years I've been sales training. Well, Michael, I don't want everyone no one's going to sound like a robot. I've never been told I sound like a robot. My salespeople have never been told they sound like a robot. If you know how to build relationships and rapport with people, we're talking about, that's why the very first step was how to win.
Yeah. Everyone has to have a framework. We're not making robots. I think these are you can call them frameworks. You can call them
processes, whatever you want.
You can call it a freaking recipe. I don't care. But you have to understand what goes into this first before you can start tweaking it out. And word for word, sure, they might sound like a robot at first, but they're going to have to learn how to have these conversations. Yeah, I also could go on a riff here, because the number one human need that we all crave is stability. We want to feel safe. And in order to feel safe and secure, we have to have consistency in our life. We have to know that we can count on something. And if you continually change things up, well, that violates the first human need. But also that doesn't make me feel safe and secure or confident in my position, because you're not allowing me to actually get deep enough into, okay, what is rapport? Like, how do I build rapport? Yep. And actually get deep enough into the conversation to be able to hear and actively listen when somebody tells you something very slightly that you go, ooh, I need to make note of that. They shifted in their tone and how they said that. That's really important. If you don't have that framework and you're willy-nilly, you're screwed.
Yep.
You really are, because you have nothing to standardize and you have nothing to hold accountable.
No.
And I think...
Or reference.
Oh my gosh, we're just riffing about... this is so important, though, because when you look at the whole sales process and you look at what keeps you up at night and your revenue going this roller coaster, and it's because everything leading up to production is a roller coaster. Set some boundaries. Like, what is our lead quality? What is our minimum expectation for our customer? Like, what is our standard of, what are our liability limits? What is our service time? How long? I mean, like, these are all things that you need to.
That's step one, how to win.
Yeah, you got to identify all of that, because if not, you're saying, well, my production is inconsistent. Well, yeah, because you're not even playing the game yet. There are no rules of the game yet.
This is you just made a great, and this will be a great way to end. So this example right here. So how to win. So first we teach them the conversation, and then part of the how to win process is every single customer, we're going to quote an umbrella, an auto, and a fire product. That's the how to win part. Well, so then the expectation is the second piece. So that's so now we're going to have three of these in this example, 3 of these conversations a day, to where we are building rapport, having a discovery conversation, presenting an umbrella, auto, and renter's policy, and asking for the sell 3 times in this example. And then the accountability. Because what happens when you're reviewing the quotes and all of a sudden you've got a team that is just quoting single line autos? Well, that's not what we talked about in the how to win of the standard of excellence. And that also looks like you're quoting single line autos. So the accountability is now you have something to hold them accountable to. This is the piece that the how to win piece is typically the piece that gets missed. So the how to win and then the accountability. It's the, hey, I need you to do 10 quotes a day every single day, which means you're probably going to make 150 calls a day, email them out, text them out, don't care, just get the quotes done, the production will. That is a losing formula.
Yeah.
Because the 2 most important parts that I feel like is the how to win and the accountability. If you win, if you lose. Most people have an expectation in their agency of a certain amount of quotes per day. Now, the definition of a quote sometimes gets thrown in the air. What is a quote? Is a quote an email? Is it a text? Is it asking for the sell? Is it presenting a price? What is a quote? But you want to talk about consistent production, teach your team how to win, hold them accountable to the formula for win, and then hold them, or the expectations on a daily, clear, concise, and then hold them accountable to that.
Yeah, I think it's leadership 101 too. As a leader, if I ask you a question and I can continue to clarify with you, what does that mean? What does that mean? Tell me more. It's not defined all the way. If I were to ask you, what does your sales process look like? You should be able to clearly tell me back, what does your sales process look like start to finish? What does your training process look like start to finish? What does that look like? It has to be able to be clearly defined. If we don't clearly define things and we leave them up to chance, we will create our own story. Every one of us will. We all have different definitions, and things mean different things to different people based on our experiences and our backgrounds and how we were raised. We all attach meaning to things. These have to be black and white.
Yep.
We write 100, 300. That's it. We write 100, 300. There's no there's no guessing, there's no questioning, there's none of that. The more we can eliminate that, the less brain power we have to use. And we can use that brain power to getting better. We can use that brain power to having better conversations. We can use that brain power to actually feed ourselves and go, I'm going to be a more confident salesperson, right? Instead of going, wait, hold on, let me adjust the lever on what coverages I do on this one, depending on what this person wants.
Nope.
It's like, let's create a standard here that also becomes the standard of your office. When you start holding that consistently, like, this is who we are, you own that. And you start showing up like that. Gosh, this was a good one.
This is a good one. And it's one that success doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't. Success doesn't have to be hard, but you have to know how to win.
Yeah.
You have to know what you need to do on a daily basis. And you also need to know, hey, if I do win, here's what's in it for me. And if I don't win, here's what the conversation is going to sound like. And if you can just get those done, man, you will be wildly successful in insurance. I don't care if you're an agency owner right now listening to this or a sales producer. Just do yourself a favor. Get clear, concise, achievable items that you can do on a daily basis. Hold yourself accountable to those, and understand if you haven't been taught how to win, or if you don't know how to win yet, go and ask. Like, hey, what kind of conversation do you want me having every single day? Like, what is an actual quote? Let's define what a quote is. Let's define what our standards of excellence are that you just reference. Hey, we're never going to write anyone less than 100, 300, and we're never going to write a single line policy in this insurance. Well, what happens if they're not a customer for us? Do you understand the time, energy, effort, like everything that goes into that you just referenced, that automatically makes it more simple to be like, they're not a qualified lead. They're not a lead for us. They're a lead for somebody, but they're not a lead for us. Yeah. Like, man, this was so good.
Yeah. Save your GABA. Save your decision-making brain juice for something else.
What's GABA?
GABA's your decision-making brain juice.
Oh.
Yeah, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure I heard it on the webs.
I thought it was like a new kid terminal, not new kid. I call them kids, like a Gen Z. Like, instead of just
we're sounding old.
Instead of just chilling today, we're gonna go rot.
Yeah,
what?
No, GABA's actually. Yeah, I think now you're making me question myself. You know what? I'm going to take this time, since I already have my day standardized. I'm going to go optimize and find out what the hell GABA actually is. I'm pretty sure it's your decision-making juice in your brain. But thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you have more questions around consistent production and you don't know where to start, that's the whole reason why we created Weaver Sales Academy, was to take that time and give it back to you. So we take the training, we take the coaching, we take everything that you don't want to worry about as an agency owner. We take that off of your plate. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can shoot us a text, 816-727-7610, and let us know. And sign up, don't sign up. You talk to us every single day. We'll give you any answer that we have. Our whole goal with this podcast is to really pull back the curtain. We want to simplify success for you. We want this to be as easy and as fun as possible. And we're here cheering you on every single day. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Catch you on the next one.